Salah has one more match to play at the Africa Cup of Nations before returning to Liverpool. It's not the one he wanted. Egypt missed out on a place in the final, losing to his former Liverpool teammate Sadio Mane's Senegal. And with the tournament switching to a 4-year cycle, was this the last chance for the now 33-year-old to add to his trophy haul? Add this one to his trophy haul, I should say. We're joined by our Liverpool training. We're at the training ground now. We're going to speak to a fan shortly. We're at the training ground now. Vinny O'Connor is there for us. Vinny, just the third place to go for Salah. There will be a lot of attention on him when he returns, OK? You know that. Just reminds of the events leading up to his departure from the club.
Well, I suppose it goes back to the 6th of December and that interview he gave after the 3-3 draw with Leeds. Actually, you could go a bit before that because, of course, his last start for Liverpool was against PSV Eindhoven in the Champions League and that 4-1 defeat at Anfield. He was then benched for the game against West Ham, an unused substitute in that game. Liverpool winning that one 2-0 before the Sunderland game. And actually, Mo Salah was called upon at half-time by Arne Slot. Liverpool just eking out a 1-1 draw at home to Sunderland on that occasion before he was benched again for that game against Leeds, the third consecutive game he was on the bench and the second game in those three that he wasn't used. And it was after that game that he gave the explosive interview where he said that he felt he was being thrown under the bus, that his relationship with Arne Slot had broken down. At least he felt that. And he also felt that there was someone at the club who wanted him out. That saw him left out of the squad completely for the trip to Milan and that victory over Inter Milan in the Champions League. He then had talks with Arne Slot, patched up the differences to a certain extent. He was back in the squad for the game against Brighton. Again, he was on the bench for that one, but he was called on in the 26th minute when Joe Gomez went down with an injury, and he actually played a big part in that as well because it was his assist that got Hugo Ekitike's second goal of the game. Lovely corner as well, back to the far post, towering header from Ekitike, and that was his last action for Liverpool before heading off to the African Cup of Nations, where he's hit 4 goals and 1 assist in his 5 games over there. A bit quiet, I suppose, in the semi-final, but Egypt were as a whole, and now Liverpool are just waiting for his imminent return after that 3rd and 4th place playoff.
Vinny, I'm right in saying the way you've kind of led it there is that he's like kind of lit up the AFCON Cup with 4 goals and an assist, and numbers are good. But I've watched a few of the games, I've seen the comments. I don't think he's been as effective. I am worried about his father time undefeated as always, as we've seen as Liverpool this year when he's played. He hasn't been playing at his best. Is he more of a headache or is he an asset to Liverpool for the run-in for the rest of this season?
I don't think he's necessarily a headache, Darragh. I think he's still got the ability to produce. But yeah, I think we've seen his numbers drop off as a whole. It was only 4 goals he scored in the Premier League before his departure, of course, for the African Cup of Nations as well. And that's going back earlier in the season. And it's such a drop off, I suppose, from last season as well. But at the same time, I think Liverpool need the option of him at the moment. There's certainly no plans for him to be leaving in this transfer window. And you look at the injuries that they've got. Isak out for a while at the moment with that fracture. And the fact is that Mo Salah can operate through the middle up front. He's another option to Hugo Ekitike rather than Ekitike just shouldering the workload, albeit, of course, Cody Gakpo can play in that role as well. But also down the right-hand side, and we know that Liverpool have injury problems down there. So if you've got the fact that Conor Bradley is out for a while now, then Jeremy Frimpong you'd expect to play at right back, although there's Joe Gomez there as cover as well. There is the opportunity, supposed to play a Joe Gomez at right back and Frimpong a bit further ahead, but you would still want that option of Mo Salah. So I don't think he's a headache coming back, certainly as long as the atmosphere is good and he's happy.
I love him.
The issue becomes, I suppose,
I love him as a player.
If he's not a regular starter.
My concern about the headache part is I want him at Liverpool for the rest of the season. I agree with everything you just said about injuries, issues, But if Liverpool are winning and unbeaten and he's not getting in the team, that's what I mean. Does he then become a headache? Can you imagine if the Egyptian manager had dropped him during the AFCON? You know, there would have been, war breaking out over there. So I'm just wondering, are we going down that route again? If by chance Liverpool keep winning, keep staying unbeaten, and he's not getting off the bench as much as he likes, or he's not starting, does it then become a headache?
That's probably where I was going there, actually. Yeah, I agree with you there. That's where it does become a headache, because I think the situation as regards his happiness in the team, when we saw that interview that he gave after the Leeds game, came about because he wasn't a regular starter, and he felt that he was becoming a scapegoat for Liverpool's poor form at that point in the season. Now, he wants to be playing, he wants to be contributing to Liverpool's season, to Liverpool's chances of success as well. And if he's not playing that main man role, then it does become an issue for him. So that's where Liverpool need to play it clever, I suppose, or Arne Slot needs to play it a little bit clever if he's to stay here, and we expect him to stay here between now and the end of the season as well. We certainly don't expect him to leave in this transfer window. Liverpool have no plans for that either. But it is a difficult balancing act potentially for Arne Slot as to how happy he can keep Mo Salah if he's not a regular starter in that side.
He said that you don't expect him to go. Would Liverpool actually be open to selling him, though, if someone came in?
And again, Tom, it comes down to just how happy they can keep him between now and the end of the season. I think if he's back and he's contributing, he's producing the kind of numbers that we saw at AFCON, whether he's relatively quiet through games or not, if he's producing the numbers and he's a regular in that Liverpool side, then you expect the atmosphere between himself and Arne Slot to be pretty good and a relatively cordial relationship. If he's not a regular starter and he begins to get unhappy once again at his situation, then I would imagine that's when the conversations, or the potential conversations, start about an early exit from his contract. Remember, he's contracted to Liverpool until 2027, the summer of 2027. But as it stands, certainly Liverpool aren't planning those conversations, aren't planning for him to be having an early exit, whether it's in this month or the summer.
Away from Salah, what are Liverpool's transfer plans this month?
Well, Tom, at the moment, it's going to be relatively quiet, or certainly that's the way Liverpool are looking at it. Yes, there's the injury to Conor Bradley, for instance, and I think in some quarters there was an expectation that Liverpool would look to maybe get in reinforcements. At the moment, it seems that there's no real plans to bring in an out-and-out right-back to cover for Conor Bradley's absence. They do have options. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Obviously, Joe Gomez can play there. We've seen the likes of Szoboszlai and Curtis Jones used at right-back at times this season. Wataru Endo, when he's fit as well, can operate at right back, so there's not necessarily that need to bring someone in as well. So we see Liverpool often not bringing in players just for the sake of it, and not panicking when they have issues in terms of their squad, and looking to bring in long-term targets. I think the thing that would change was if a long-term target becomes available in this window, then Liverpool can act. And you're thinking about Mark Gay and his situation at the moment, and certainly if Manchester City were to move for him in this window, then you would expect Liverpool to respond to that as well. But as it stands, their plan is to still try and bring Mark Gay in on a free in the summer. They were so close, obviously, to getting him in the summer for that £35 million deal that they agreed with Crystal Palace, only for Palace to back out because they couldn't get in adequate cover for him. So the plan is, certainly Liverpool's interest hasn't waned in Mark Gay. The plan is still to try and bring him in on that free transfer in the summer. Of course, if other teams were to get involved and try and snap Mark Gay out from under Liverpool's noses, then you would expect Liverpool to respond.
Darryl, what would you do in terms of trying to get Mark Gay?
I would get him now. Look, Liverpool can speak to him now, I believe, by the rules of the law. He's out of contract in the summer.
Well, no, it's only if it's a club from abroad.
Abroad, right, okay. Well, they'll still probably be speaking to him now, and, big shock for you right there. I would do a deal with Palace. I'd get him in the building now. I worry that's the one area, you can get away with things up the pitch, you can get away with things in wide areas. Defensively, we are fragile. Losing players left, right and centre, particularly in the right back position. If you lose a Van Dijk in the next month, you are going to panic about qualifying for the Champions League, and that changes all your transfer plans then in the summer. That's a big problem. And I don't want to hear about, Gravenberch can step in there or somebody else can step in from midfield. We saw what happened a few years ago. By the will of Alisson scoring a goal away at Stoke or wherever it was, Liverpool, West Brom, we're going to have issues getting into the Champions League. So if I'm the owners, for the sake of 25 million, and they were going to do that deal for 35 in the summer with Palace, get Parish on the phone, get a deal done, and get him signed. Because if you leave that to the summer, with the power of some big clubs and money and wages, and you saw Diaz leaving for Bayern Munich in the summer, because Liverpool wouldn't pay him 300 grand a week. If you get in that position over Gehe and you lose him, you're going to have to go and spend 50, 60 million on a centre half of that quality, aren't you? So just get it done.
Vinny will be across it, no doubt.
Mikel Arteta's work at Arsenal is being viewed in an even brighter light after the recent coaching shakeups elsewhere. With Chelsea parting ways with Enzo Maresca and Manchester United moving on from Ruben Amorim, the contrast is hard to miss. Arsenal has kept moving forward under Arteta, giving him time through difficult stretches, and now seeing the payoff as the club pushes again in the Premier League title race. It also raises a bigger question about strategy. While Chelsea and United are changing direction again, Arteta has been in place for more than 6 years, outlasting a long list of managers across those two clubs in that span. That stability has become part of the story, and it was a major talking point on the Seeing Red podcast with Tom Canton and John Cross. Beyond reacting to Amorim's dismissal and breaking down wins over Aston Villa and Bournemouth, plus Manchester City's loss to Chelsea, the conversation kept returning to one core idea: structure. Not just who is the coach, but how much power that coach has, and whether the club is built to support a long-term project. Cross pointed to Arsenal as a rare example of patience turning into real strength. He argued that Arsenal's willingness to back Arteta through the messy early phases helped create the stable position they're in now, and that this kind of time and support investment is what can turn a club into something truly solid. Canton's response was sharp and honest. Arteta's arc, he said, has almost become a problem for other clubs, because it tempts them to keep coaches they probably shouldn't. But at the same time, it's still the best example of what can happen when you hire the right person and actually give them time. And that time wasn't smooth. The discussion highlighted how Arsenal could easily have pulled the plug early. 2 8th-place finishes, then 5th, missing out on the Champions League, and a Europa League semi-final exit to Unai Emery's Villarreal. Any of those moments could have pushed a club into panic mode. Instead, the argument is that Arsenal recognized the bigger reality. Arteta didn't have the resources to compete at the required level right away. The squad needed a rebuild. The roster needed to be refreshed. That's where the comparison to Chelsea and United becomes even more pointed. The podcast suggested that recruitment and decision-making structure are often what determine whether a coach survives. If signings don't land, results suffer. And if a coach doesn't have enough influence, or the club isn't aligned behind a clear plan, it becomes much easier for things to collapse. In other words, giving time only works if the coach is empowered to shape the team in a way that matches the vision. Cross also emphasized that Arteta's situation stood out because he pushed to be a true manager, not just a head coach. The idea is simple. Top coaches want a real say in the build, and they want the club to match what they were promised when they took the job. The discussion even pointed to how Arteta survived a low moment, like the home loss to Burnley, because the club stayed behind him. And in that period, with fan pressure affected by the COVID-era environment, Arsenal were able to hold their nerve instead of reacting emotionally. Meanwhile, the big unknowns now shift back to Chelsea and Manchester United. Who replaces Amorim? And how will the next chapter look at Chelsea? The answers may come sooner than people expect. But for Arsenal, the reality stays the same. They're stable, they're moving forward, and they're still in the title chase, while others are starting over again. And that contrast can shape how people judge every manager in the league. Because when two massive clubs hit the reset button again, it forces the same question Cross raised on the show. Is the quick switch actually fixing the problem, or just delaying the real work? The bigger takeaway from the discussion is that time isn't a magic solution by itself. It only becomes valuable when the club's structure supports the plan, and when the coach has the influence to push the squad in the direction he believes it needs to go. That's why the distinction between head coach and manager kept coming up. The podcast point is that if a coach is expected to own the results, he usually wants a meaningful say in the decisions that shape those results. And if he doesn't get that, patience alone won't save him. That's also where Arteta's early struggles get reframed. Those finishes and setbacks could have become a reason to panic. Instead, they became evidence of why alignment matters, because Arsenal chose to treat them as part of a build, not a final verdict. And once the squad was reshaped the way the club believed it needed to be, the results started to reflect that long-term approach. So the repercussions aren't just about Arsenal looking stable, it's about how stability changes your margin for error. When you don't reset every year, you're not constantly starting from zero. You're building on decisions, learning from setbacks, and keeping a clearer identity. For Chelsea and Manchester United, the immediate consequence is obvious. They're changing direction again, which means the next appointment carries even more weight. Because every new coach isn't just judged on results. He's judged on whether the club is finally giving him the structure and authority that the role demands. That's why the question at the end matters so much. Who will replace Amorim, and how will Liam Rosenior do at Chelsea? Because those answers will test the exact theme the show kept returning to: time, support, structure, and control. And for Arsenal, it's a different kind of pressure. Stability doesn't guarantee trophies, but it does keep you in the fight longer. And right now, while others restart, Arsenal get to stay focused on what they're already doing: chasing the Premier League title.